them off this piece of paper. In Get Millie Black, his first foray into television, Marlon James leaned into the genre of sun-soaked Jamaican noir. Our eponymous heroine, Millie Black, played with fearless tenacity by the spectacular Tamara Lawrance. Leads us on a thrill ride from the streets and beaches of Kingston to the dark underbelly of London in pursuit of a missing child. As you will soon see, this tale can be described as a ghost story. Just as Millie is haunted by her traumatic past and the memory of a sibling she couldn't protect, Jamaica, as seen in this show, is a country haunted by its colonial history, where the deep scars of racism, homophobia, and transphobia have continued to shape its present. As the political events of the past few weeks have continued to show us, those same scars dominate the present of this country as well, which is all the more reason for Hollywood to keep making shows like this one. The road to bring Get Millie Black to the screen has been a long one, and we at HBO are immensely grateful to have been a part of it. On behalf of myself, Francesca Orsi, Casey Bloys, my creative partner in crime, Sam Burns-Mandelbaum, and everyone at HBO, we'd like to thank the entire cast and crew. They worked tirelessly in Kingston, London, New York, and LA to bring this show to life, and you'll get a chance to hear from a few of them after the screening. We'd especially like to thank showrunner and executive producer Jami O'Brien, executive producer Leopoldo Gut, executive producer Simon Maxwell and his team at Moda, our partners at Channel 4, and of course, series creator Marlon James, without whom there'll be a series trailer and a Q&A after the screening, so please don't go anywhere. And now it's my great honor to hand it over to Marlon to say a few words.
I wore my sexy black dress today. Really, only one woo? Not like applause or anything. What can I say about this show? You know, if I didn't have stalkers, it would never have happened. Simon knows the story. How way back in the Stone Age, this guy named Leopoldo Gut would not leave me alone, and he said he would not. He said he's never gonna leave me alone until I write an idea for a story, for a show. And I'm on tour, and I'm writing on hotel stationery to get rid of this man. And I'm thinking of what could I possibly write that would be so unfilmable that I'd never hear from him again. And I think I'm gonna do a Jamaican show, a Jamaican detective show, mostly Jamaican people speaking thick Jamaican patois. I'll never see him again. And he goes, I spoke to this guy Simon at Channel 4, I think we have a show. And I'm like, shit. And the Millie just continued her spell. Millie cast such a spell on Simon. Simon quit his job and started to follow her. You know, he like switched from client side to producer side, and that's the power of this character. And you know, as writers and creators, and Simon, Leopoldo, myself, several of the writers, Teresa, Lydia, Joshua. We can do a lot of things, but writers can't really make characters come alive. And I remember I saw this audition, and you know, not even an audition, because it was too authoritative to be called an audition. And this person just appeared, and I go, oh my God, that's Millie. That's Millie. Who is that? I said, Tamara. I said, no, it's Millie. That's Millie. And it's, you know, you dream of situations like that where a person just shows up and just take over the role. And you can't imagine anybody else. And that is Tamara Lawrance, who, and every choice just made sense. The second I saw, you know, we saw Gershwin, we knew this was Curtis. And then you have this force of nature known as China McQueen. Every time I see her, I go, I hope you're ready to be the biggest star in the world. I hope you're ready. She's like, I'm ready. I'm like, you think you're ready? But it's just, you know, it's just such a labor of love. Or, you know, all of our directors had Jamaican connections. So for a lot of us, this was a serious labor of love. It was a labor of highs and lows. There was a lot of work. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But we all were just sort of committed to showing a side, not even a side of Jamaica, a side of Kingston we don't always see, and to bring life to characters we don't always bring life to. And to, even while we're telling this really old kind of story, the detective story, that we do things that are different. We talk about ghosts a lot in this show, largely because to come from the Caribbean is to come from a haunted place. Haunted by history, haunted by the present, and the show itself also deals with that. And if that's not enough, Lady Patra is in the damn show, people. So I don't think I have anything else more to say. I'm going to get out of the way so you can see this thing. Who you pointing at? Yeah? You want me? You're pointing at Jami.
Listen to him.
This is Leopoldo. He's like, what about Jami? What about Jami? I mean, she didn't do anything. She just came in and saved the show. It's like big deal. But I mean, that points to there's just so many people that we need to thank. And I think we're doing a lot of that at the end of this. And we have a lot more to talk about, and we have a lot more to show you, including what you're about to see. So I'm going to get out of the way so you can all see it. But from my mom, I learned that stories are, you don't create stories, you find them. And that was her job. That was her job, which is to unlock mysteries. And for me, that's how I approach stories. I feel like there's a mystery to solve. And for me, that means it was almost inevitable that I end up writing a detective show with a female lead. I'm sure my mom will take credit for it. Despite the minute I was saying it's not about her. She's gonna take credit for it anyway. And but that's how it happened. Growing up in a house with a detective. And always been fascinated by mysteries and stories. And also, I read a lot of female protagonists, just in general in the stories I write. So to me, this was almost inevitable that what was going to happen.
Simon, Marlon, you said something earlier before it started that I wanted to ask Simon about. What was about this story that made you quit your job and decide to join the producing team?
I mean, for me, it's just a completely unique project. Marlon is a totally singular author. It's just a privilege to have the opportunity to work with him. And it was a very, very clear proposition, a detective show set in Kingston, but with a completely unique and iconoclastic lead character. Like Millie is, like Marlon, a total one-off. And through Millie, we have the means to explore a Jamaica unlike anything we've seen before. So it was a lot of kind of breaking new ground that was just very exciting. So too good to resist.
Tamara, was there something about Millie that sort of pulled you to the character or interested you about the character in editing?
Yeah, definitely. I think all of her layers, really. She has this sort of tough and formidable exterior, but she's also someone that is very vulnerable. She has wounds that are rooted in this sort of traumatic childhood and lived experience with hibiscus, and so kind of the arc of the show being working through the complexities of her interpersonal relationships that she struggles with because of her unprocessed trauma, whilst also kind of navigating this very obsessive connection to her work. I thought it was an interesting duality because they're all connected to the same wound, I think.
Those relationships are kind of the core of the show in parts, and I'm curious about the ways in which you guys sort of built those on set, right, together. Was there a lot of hanging out outside of set, or what did that look like to sort of build those relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty obsessed with everyone. China was the first person I was like, who's playing Hibiscus? And then I Googled her, watched all of her videos, When I met her, I told her how much I loved her toes. I was just like gagged from the beginning. And then, I mean, I'm a massive fan of Gershwin. I've always been a fan of Gershwin. I wanted to work with Gershwin for a long time, so that friendship was already there. Obviously, was familiar with Joe's amazing talent. So I think it also happened in real time because we were there for 3 months. So I think you get to know people over the shoot, and so kind of our closeness then fed into the characters as well.
And China, this was your first acting role. It's what I read, at least. Is that still accurate?
And Marlon said that no one believes. It's true.
So how was this process for you?
I'm grateful. I was like, okay, I've never done this before. Let me give it a try. I was like, okay, and then what I love about it, the experience is I got to learn a lot, and how I did this character, and how well we matches, or China's matches hibiscus, and how I grow, and I learn so much. She teaches me a lot, character, because there are ways that she's more outspoken, more strong. She, fight for, because she's looking for love, looking to be valued, and to match her, and to match her character, and to also to learn from her is truly amazing. Best experience ever.
And this isn't really a spoiler, but part of the format of the show, right, is every episode shows a different perspective of a different character. And so the second episode, I believe, was China's episode. So can you, first, I would love to hear about sort of the decision to use that kind of format of doing a different perspective for each episode, but then also, what was it like to, I guess, reverse project having an episode that's kind of from the perspective of your character specifically?
I guess to the first part, the narrator is a pretty, it's one of the tropes of detective fiction. The detective, it was a dark, stormy night when she walked in, kind of thing. And I've always liked that, but I also think it's almost on the verge of cliche. And how can we play with that? And the idea came to us that we should have each episode somebody else tells us the story, or give us a perspective of the story of themselves, and especially of Millie. So there are narrators who have known Millie most of their lives. There are narrators who have only known her for 3 days. And throughout the season, they bring different perspectives and show different aspects of Millie. And they interact with her, and she impacts on them in very different ways. And as somebody who, the novels I write tend to have dozens of characters, and they're all talking. So I've always loved how 4 or 5 different people look at the same scene. And in some of the scenes, some of the scenes repeat in some of the episodes, and because depending on who you're with or whose eyes you're looking through, you see it in a different way, or somebody hasn't seen it before. And that to me was very important, to bring that aspect of it to this story, because it also raises the question of then who do you trust, or whose point of view do you value? And I don't answer that question for the viewer. They kind of have to make up their own minds about that.
Was that sort of a lot of work on the parts of you guys, the performers, to sort of inhabit these roles that then for specific episodes, right, became the driving force of the episode?
We're looking at you, Gershon.
It was, I think it was the first experience of like getting involved with narration of an episode. So like very much, for me, I love kind of stepping into a character and getting to play alongside everybody and kind of like immersing yourself, like, on this one in Kingston. And it was kind of a daunting task to then step back and be the narrator on it, turn off the kind of criticism of yourself when you're watching yourself on screen and just trying to give in to this character's point of view upon what's happening to him in real time. And it's when you're playing a scene, you don't want to feel sorry for a person, or you don't want to be like, oh, I'm making a wrong decision. You're kind of just trying to experience it as you're playing it with somebody else. So it's just interesting to step back and be the narrator and be, like, you know, you have to turn all of that off and just sort of give in to the words that you're given to sort of allow the viewer to take this ride along with everybody.
In this episode, it's only one episode, but I feel like we see so much of Jamaica, Kingston specifically, right? We see the strip club, we see the police station, we see the gully, we see the sort of domestic setting, right? I am curious about how important it was to show, I mean, we also see, you know, very expensive homes, right? The upper crust, so-called upper crust of Kingston. So I'm curious about how important it was to show all of that within this show. And I wonder if it comes from what you were saying just a second ago about having so many voices talking and having that sort of represented in a different way.
I mean, it's the number of voices talking, but also if you live in Jamaica, if you grew up in Kingston, you know there are like a million different Kingstons. You know there are you know, and in the course of that episode, we go from the gully right up to the mansions, and sometimes these Kingstons don't even, you know, don't even have anything to do with each other. I have friends who they didn't see downtown Kingston until I took them. And I'm like, you know, there are people in Sweden who know Kingston better than you do. But you know, it's a remnants of class and colonialism and all that stuff that we're still dealing with in Jamaica, and we still, you know, we talk about the 21 families that run Jamaica. It must be like 15 now. They must be dead right now. But you know, but a lot of that is. You know, a lot of that is still there. It is very easy to live in a Jamaica that a lot of other people don't live in. And Millie, one of the reasons why I like the detective genre, why I like crime stories, is that usually the thing we all have in common is the terrible things we do. And a crime story, a detective story, usually ends up cutting across all of that. So it was a really good vehicle to then examine where we are as a country.
I actually, I'm getting out of order from the questions I wrote down, but this makes me think, Tamara, when I was watching the episodes, I felt like Millie was kind of code switching a bit, particularly with her speech, and I thought it was something maybe she could do because she had left Jamaica for quite a while and come back, and so she sort of had this experience. And I'm curious, one, am I listening too hard and making things up? And two, what it was like for you to sort of, right, we're seeing all these spaces, but not all of the characters go to all the spaces, and Millie really does. And so what it was like for you to adjust to all those different parts of Kingston that we saw.
Yeah, Millie, code switching is a device I really enjoy in that it's a way, she uses it intentionally, either as a way to alienate or a way to connect. I think she does it with Holborn to kind of create distance, and then with Janet and Ruth Fenton to try and, you know, be like, you know, you can trust me, you can talk to me, and then yeah, across the show as well, you can see when when she's in her fullness of emotional rage as well. I think kind of when I think about my mom in the height of her anger, it's like Patois is her kind of first port of call, and I think, you know, Millie, when there's a time when Hibiscus and Millie get in each other's faces, and it's really I think that scene felt very true to me in terms of when you're in a Jamaican household and someone's kicking off and things are getting flung at the wall and people are cussing bad word and things like that. So I think the show gives there's an emotional scope that is explored through code switching also. But yeah, for me personally, to adjust to all the different spaces, I was like, we were in Seaview and I was just thinking, oh yeah, that song where they talk about Seaview, and then we were in kind of Hellshire and I was like, or is it Portmore? I was like, see, so we do it at Portmore. There's like a bar spot. I was like, oh yeah. I was just like seeing all these places that I'd heard in dancehall. So yeah, well, obviously was being very professional on set and things like that. But like, yeah, in the back of my mind, I was like, oh my god. So yeah, I was, yeah, it was amazing to see because I guess my lens on Jamaica was just the four walls of my kitchen and kind of music and food and stories from my mum, but and then also the very colonial lens of Jamaica as a paradise with beaches and things like that. So to be able to have this experience where you get to see downtown and these kind of old plantation homes was very, very visceral for me.
Can you guys, I'm not sure who's the best person to speak to this, but you mentioned the patois, and I wanted to hear a little bit about sort of the decision to really do the show in an authentic patois, and also to use the captions. And I've heard stories about different shows and their uses of captions and how they sort of discover these interesting problems that they didn't realize would be there until they started working through the process. And so I'm curious about the decisions that were made there in the process.
I can talk about that a little bit. We talked a lot, obviously I think the decision for the show to be written to have so much patois in the dialogue comes from just wanting to tell the truth, I think, and also just from Marlon's, creative vision for the show. And then there was a lot of conversation about whether or not to subtitle the show early on, and we debated it back and forth. And, ultimately, we came down, working with all of our partners at HBO. We didn't want to alienate a global audience and lock them out of the language, nor did we want to adjust the language for their benefit. Do you know what I mean? And so we felt like the subtitles actually allowed us to do both, to kind of bring everyone in, but also allow the dialect to remain authentic and not try to, anglicize it in any way. We worked, it was an interesting process actually. We worked with a linguist, Dr. Joseph Farquharson, he worked with Marlon and myself painstakingly, where we would spend hours debating over the placement of a comma in the subtitles. But ultimately, I think it was for the good of the show, and I think it's not a decision. It's interesting too. Sorry, I feel like I'm not to make this all about subtitles, but they're not subtitling it in Britain, which I also think is an interesting choice. And I think. Go ahead, Simon.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's literally 0 subtitles in the Channel 4 version. So it's just, I guess that was just a decision that was made where, conversely, there's a very, very close affiliation between the UK and Jamaica. We're really used to hearing Jamaican accents, and the commissioners at Channel 4 basically made the decision, let's not subtitle. Some of the lines of dialogue may not land on the ear to some of the audience members, but they're just going to go with it. So it's literally the opposite decision, and it's going to be interesting to see how both of them play, I think.
So I really want to talk about the inclusion of the Gully in the show and the Gully Queens. And so I thought that I think the question is just how was that decision made that would be a part of the show, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. When I write stories, sometimes I begin and there's already a character, and sometimes characters just show up. And I remember I was watching Channel 4's documentary on the Gully Queens, and there was one character in it, one person in it, I forgot her name, but she was just left with nothing, like nothing at all. And the only thing she had left is this belief that tomorrow just has to be better. There's just no other choice. It just has to get better. And I remember just breaking down when I saw it. And I remember even when I was talking about this in a very, very early meeting with Leopoldo and Simon, and I was showing them the character who Hibiscus was based on, and I just started crying. And that's not something you want to do in Soho House, honestly. Yeah, can you imagine? Because it moved me in such a way and it wrecked me in such a way, and I knew that person was going to be in the show. Characters who I just can't forget are the ones I usually end up writing about. And that's how Hibiscus came about. Even before I realized that Hibiscus and Millie were sisters. I'm also, to write in the Caribbean is to respond to erasure. And there is so much erasure of queerness in the Caribbean in all its forms. And I was talking to Edwidge Dantica about it's not that we necessarily think we have a mission as writers, but one of the things we do all have in common, whether it's me or her or Juno Diaz, is that we talk about the parts of Caribbean that has been underspoken, erased, and so on. And I'm a pretty out gay dude, so I'm already kind of an anomaly in this. I had to think about how I was going to come out, so I came out in the New York Times. I'm like, why not? Start small. But it's funny. I'm writing a novel now about gay life in Jamaica, and one of the characters said, if we ever did a day without the gay in Jamaica, the country would grind to a halt. But it's the contribution that we've made, but also the way in which we are in the margins, and also the way in which, even though we are, Jamaica is infamous for its homophobia, but we also have, these sort of very vital lives and subcultures and people, and I wanted to show that as well.
So I thought, like, in this conversation on queerness of the characters, I actually found Gershwin's character Curtis to be really an interesting example of queerness, I think, in Jamaica, and maybe that's my outsider perspective, right? But I think to be a policeman in a country that still has an anti-buggery law on the books, right? Which we obviously, you guys discussed, kind of well referenced in the show. I thought it was really interesting, and I would love to hear from you a little bit about sort of the mind space that sort of you have to be in to play a character like that.
I think for me, like first audition, second audition, getting to sort of delve into the relationship between Curtis and Daniel, and what we see on screen, definitely later on in the series, you see it straight away as well, is the loving and supporting relationship between the two of them. And it was important for me to be able to show that on screen. I think that Jomo playing Daniel is an incredible individual, incredibly intelligent, like not difficult to fall in love with a person like that. And so, yeah, the interesting part was when they're at home. It's, as I said, this loving and supporting relationship. The second you step out of that door, it's how the world sort of, I don't want to say the word attacking, but it's how he has to hide his true identity and then step into, that chameleon skin and sort of assimilate himself within the police force. So what was interesting in playing him was just what are those cracks that he sort of doesn't know he's showing, and he thinks he's hiding himself, but it's that thing that spending time down there that you find out is people know, but they just don't talk about it. And even that it's a horrible sort of place to be, like not having someone to turn to and just have an open conversation with. So it was important for me to jump into playing a character like that because it's a real story.
And I think what's really interesting, right, is the scene in the car between Curtis and Hibiscus, right? And I think that in that way, right, like Hibiscus sees those cracks that you're referring to, right?
It's so interesting though, because like he's denying himself, and even if there's a percentage of an acceptance of what he is in that moment, I'm this and you're you. I'm not that, so I'm protected by this sort of skin that I wear, which is it's the ferocity at which he comes at her. Was really interesting to sort of explore that moment. Yeah.
She wasn't having it.
But so that's another. I mean, I don't have too much more time, but I did want to talk a little bit about trying to sort of. Hibiscus doesn't say a lot, but she's quite. I don't know if stoic is the word, but she's very super strong in the space that she's in and the spaces that she's inhabiting. And so I'm just a little curious about sort of like portraying that. And did that just come from like something that you already have, or was there something that you were sort of channeling or envisioning while portraying her in those moments?
By the way, I do not take critiques from the directors, and I like to do my own, and then and more I'd be like, trying to know, you know. I mean, why not? Let's try this. But yeah, some little bit of me and Mike, because my face full of so much expression. So when I'm watching it there, I was like, oh, I did that, and I see where I definitely understand where that was coming from, and certain events I could relate to. So I was like, even when I was in the scene with Curtis, when Curtis was looking at me and I said, you see this, Sarah Tessa? You see this what's happening? And yeah, so a little bit of me was in Hibiscus, and that also helps portray Hibiscus as a character. I mean, trans woman playing a trans woman, that's big, that's big.
I am curious if that, from what I read it is, but I'm curious if that sort of dynamic is popular or often seen in Jamaica, right? The dynamic between Curtis and Hibiscus of the sort of like maybe DL closeted sort of gay man, masculine appearing gay man, sort of, obviously it's something we've seen historically even here in the States, right? Sort of pushing away or further marginalizing a trans woman. And I'm curious if that's something that's quite common there, particularly around, from what I've seen, it was a discussion around the Gully Queens. And if so, if that's why it wasn't sort of.
I mean, I think it's common everywhere. I think there has always been the gay guy who can pass. And the gay guys are not fooling anybody, even when they're trying to pass. Yeah. And there's always been that tension, because I am at where you are, I'm at where you have yet to go. And I think it's something that, as the show progresses in his own way, Curtis gets there. Yeah.
Sadly, that's all the time that we have. Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you guys for chatting with us. If I'm not mistaken, there's an after party. Yeah. And I think everybody's gonna be there. So thank you, everyone.